be on her own. And she picks up all the pieces. She's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Yeah, she's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home. It all seemed so easy till she did it on her own. There's so much she can teach me. She's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Yeah, she's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Till she She's better off than she has ever been. Now she's made her peace with everything. Yeah, she's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Yeah, she's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Yeah, she's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. She's going home. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. I miss the taste of the sweet life. I miss the conversation. I'm searching for a song tonight. I'm changing all of the stations. I like to think that we had it all. We drew a map to a better place. But on that road I took a fall. Oh baby, why did you run away? I was there for you in your darkest times. I was there for you in your darkest night. But I wonder where we are. When I was down on my knees, and you said you had my back, so wonder where we are. All the roads you took came back to me. So I'm following the map that leads to you. The map that leads to you. Ain't nothing I can.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm very happy to have the chance to talk to you about Costa Rica. When I was in college, Costa Rica was one of the first non-American countries that I ever visited. I came here as a junior in college on a research project that we were undertaking. And it was a real pleasure for me to get a chance to learn something about the country of Costa Rica and the people of the country. And Costa Rica has become one of the most important and I think popular destinations for especially folks from North America, but really from all around the world. It is a unique country today for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that it doesn't have a standing army. There's no standing defense force, so it doesn't have to defend itself from external forces. And even back when I first was here, it had become a popular retirement destination for many folks in North America. They had favorable tax advantages, and it was a beautiful country with many, many cultural resources and a very rich place. So some of you may even have relatives who live here in retirement. Is there anybody who does? Or are you thinking about it yourself? If we do actually have a chance to visit, I heard the captain's announcement this morning. I wasn't sure whether we were actually going to be able to dock, but providing that we are, I think you'll find that it is really an amazing place, and a place that many people have found to be enormously interesting. I'm going to not talk about the Spanish-influenced Costa Rica, although on my chart here, on my title slide, I have one of the most famous symbols of Costa Rica. This is the carretera. These decorated carts are found all over the country, and they are emblematic of the Hispanic version of Costa Rican culture. Just so you know, that Costa Ricans are known popularly as ticos. So when you talk to someone from Costa Rica on the shore, you can ask them about being a tico. And that is something that's emblematic of what they're doing. But I'm going to talk to you about the indigenous cultures of Costa Rica. When I first came to Costa Rica as a student, I lived in a boarding house with a lovely woman. Her name was Senora Pacheco. And she told me on the first day that I arrived, she would say, Costa Rica is different than every other Latin American country because we are puros castellanos. We are pure Castilian. Somos blancos, somos puros castellanos. And I was surprised to hear this, but it was something that obviously she believed. But in the course of actually doing work in Costa Rica, I found that that was, in fact, not at all true. That there are many, many indigenous people in Costa Rica, and they add a tremendous amount of richness to the life of the country. So I wanted to explore a bit about the indigenous people of Costa Rica. One of the most important features of Costa Rica is the ecological diversity of the country. It is one of the most ecologically diverse places on the planet. And if you go hiking in the mountains in Costa Rica, it is shocking, really. You walk 100 yards or 200 yards, and all of a sudden you're in a different ecological zone. Different plants, different animals, different climate. And this ecological diversity is one of the things that has shaped human population throughout the years in Costa Rica. So the result is that it required distinctive adaptations by different population groups who adapted remarkably to these very, very different ecological conditions. So the sheer variety in Costa Rica is kind of overwhelming, but humans are wonderfully adaptive and have been able to adapt very sufficiently to these various ecological situations. So let's ask ourselves, who are the indigenous peoples of Costa Rica? And if you take a look at this map here, you'll see the colored regions are the indigenous populations and where they are today. And if you take a look at you'll see that they're largely grouped here in the southeast, and we're docking here in Punta Arenas. So we are reasonably close to some of them. I don't think that any of our excursionists are going to be able to get directly into the indigenous areas, but you may see in arts and crafts stores, you may see people on the street. Obviously, when cruise ships come in, the indigenous populations like to greet them in traditional dress and with traditional ceremonies and music and dance. So you may see many of these indigenous populations when we actually dock. So again, the question about ecology and how ecology shapes diversity is an important question for us to talk about. Now, why is this distinctiveness important? Well, one of the things that is especially important about Costa Rica is that it was a cultural and ecological crossroads. Geographically, Costa Rica exists between Mesoamerica and South America. And in the course of the development of great civilizations in the New World, you find that Costa Rica lies right between the Aztec, Maya, and Mixtec empires to the north, and the Inca Empire to the south, and also the Muisca Empire that I talked about with regard to Colombia. So Costa Rica is right there in the middle, caught between these great empires, and the distinctiveness of the Costa Rican civilization lies in the fact that they are not the same kind of monumental empire culture. But that doesn't mean that they were not highly civilized and didn't develop some extraordinarily important technological advances in their development. But the ecological diversity of the country also provided a challenge for other empires who might like to conquer them, because the terrain was so incredibly difficult and diverse. So we have a natural barrier to the incursion of these larger empires, and a place for traditional indigenous populations to really develop. So the distinction from the Mayans and the Aztecs is important, and from the Incas and the Muisca further to the south. So our story starts really with where I started with the population of Colombia last time we talked, and that's with the early migrations, which arrived between 12,000 and 8,000 before the Common Era, BCE. And we talked in my talk on Colombia about the fact that there were both inland routes over the Bering Land Bridge that came down through land routes in North America, and a newer theory that there may have been coastal traffic that helped populate the areas of both North and South America. So the early arrivals into Costa Rica and this area developed niche specializations, again, depending on their climatic conditions. So let's take a look at these historical periods. We can talk about the Paleo Indian settlements that took place before about 2000 BCE. The then archaic foraging that took place during this period of time, and finally the consolidation of these groups into Neolithic agriculture and animal husbandry, and finally the contact with Western civilization after there had been developed communities, developed civilizational periods within these communities. So we start with the archaic adaptation. I'm getting tired of repeating myself, but let's do it again. Multiple ecosystems were exploited. And here are three of the main ones. The coastal ecological niche during the archaic period, the rainforest, and also the páramo, or the plains, with dry forests and clear seasonality. And these were all very different. And the early plant management took place in this area. What we find in Costa Rica, as opposed to many of the other areas of Latin America, is that Costa Rica has adopted both the kinds of agriculture that we find in Mexico and further north in Mesoamerica, and also the tropical fruits and vegetables that we find a little further to the south. So the cuisine and the natural food supply that people had was extremely diverse compared to other parts of Latin America, or even or either both north of Costa Rica and south of Costa Rica. There was no single staple on which they relied, and we'll talk about this in a minute. In Mexico, Guatemala, and further north, what we find is the important tripartite staple of corn, beans, and squash. And maybe we'll have some in the Lido. I think we already have had corn, beans, and squash. These are naturally symbiotic cultivars because they help to provide the nutrients that allow the other two cultivars to grow. And also the space that they occupy can be at pretty much the same space. You can have beans growing on a corn stalk and squash down below, and it is a very important area. Well, this didn't quite happen in Costa Rica, in early Costa Rica. It did eventually come and became a part of the Costa Rican diet and habitation, but they also had tree fruits and tropical fruits that didn't grow further north in order to supplement their diet. So we know already from palynology. Palynology is the study of plant pollens. Some of you may know this. Plant pollens virtually never deteriorate. They stay in the soil essentially forever, and they're like little rocks. And so when we, as archaeologists, look at an archaeological site, we can go through the dirt in the archaeological site, and the pollens that were present in the site are still available for us to analyze. So we know quite a lot about the paleo diet in Costa Rica, and we know how diverse it was, much more diverse than we find in Mexico further north. So following the foraging period of history, we have the development of villages and early hierarchy. Maize was gradually adapted in this period of time, and tree crops and tubers, manioc and other kinds of tuberous vegetables were also found. The tubers mostly are indigenous to South America, whereas the maize is mostly indigenous to North America. So when we have this overlap of tuberous food sources and corn, beans, and squash from the north, we see this really hybrid kind of development in Costa Rica. Now, what happened in Costa Rica was, because of these small ecological niches, we don't get big capitals like in Tulum or in Chichen Itza or in these other great civilizations with big, pyramids and sacrificial altars and huge monumental structures. What we have in Costa Rica are individual chiefdoms. And this is the development of individual chiefdoms starts around 300 CE, 300 in the Common Era. And the term that we use for these are caciques or caciques. And this is a term that is used specifically for this kind of Latin American chiefdom. And so these chiefly communities were widely dispersed, and there was no particular huge urban center for them. Now, Costa Rica is a relatively small country, so the possibility of trade and exchange was not too difficult. for this geographical spread of the population. And these were, we know, hereditary, based on the examination of later populations. And in fact, the caciques still exist and are still hereditary. And the monumental architecture that existed largely consisted of large gathering places. These were flat places which probably were done for organizational purposes, but not for ritual or ceremonial purposes. And what we find is that, remarkably, we have advanced craftsmanship in these during this period. These are advanced jade and ceramics, and these have been dug up all over Costa Rica. They are really remarkable. I will give you a little warning, and that is that sometimes you'll go into souvenir stores in Costa Rica, and they'll claim to have ancient ceramics and jade. A lot of them are counterfeit. But there are real ones. You see them largely in museums, and for many, many years, the government of Costa Rica was trying desperately to preserve and keep the fake the ceramics and the fake jade objects from being widely promulgated, and also to keep the real ones from being stolen. The archaeological sites in Costa Rica are national property, and so the people are not supposed to actually remove and sell stuff from bona fide archaeological sites. Well, the reason that they're counterfeited and that they're so popular is because they're really extraordinary. They're very, very beautiful objects, and to have these objects having been produced in other than a very, very large ceremonial center like Teotihuacan is something that is very, very special in terms of our understanding of archaeological material in civilization. So we have these advanced areas of development, and the most important one is the Guayabo de Turrialba. Now, the Guayabo civilization, we don't really know what they called themselves. We existed for about 2,000 years, from about 1,000 BCE to about 1,000 CE. And the reason that we call them the Guayabo civilization is because they were clustered around the Guayabo River. And it's very common in archaeology that we find a civilization and then we have no idea actually what they were really called, especially in areas where there was no writing system. So the Guayabo de Turrialba, we assume that it was a political and ceremonial center. Now, I'll give you another little secret about archaeology. When we don't know what something is used for, we say it's for religious purposes. Either that or it's a toy. But the reason that you can say that is because a lot of times it's true that things really were religious, really were used for religious purposes. And the Guayabo de Turrialba is now a national park in Costa Rica, and it's in the mountainous area. Turrialba is the volcano in the mountains of Costa Rica, around which this civilization was established. Now, one of the hallmarks of the Guayabo de Turrialba is its advanced water engineering. Now, I'm hoping you can see this. These are water courses that have been carved in the stone, and they are essentially drainage ditches. In the mountains around the volcano, Turrialba, you have an enormous amount of rainfall. And the rainfall, of course, can completely inundate a village. So these people obviously developed some ways of channeling the water so that it wouldn't be destructive for the population, and that is terrific. Now we also have paleo. We also have petroglyphs that's found in the Guayaba de Turrialba that show that they had some kind of symbolic representations, some kind of symbolic writing. Again, we don't know what they actually mean, but we can guess because we know that the societies during this period of time were primarily shamanistic. And so the shamanistic symbolism that we find in these societies is a very important hallmark of how they organize their civilization. So the engineering, the water engineering, the petroglyphs, the flat plains that they established were important features of this archaeological site. Now, also in this period in the Guayabo area, we find these amazing gold works. These are pendants, they're amulets, they're plates, and this reflects a north-south trade network. They obviously knew the process of lost wax casting. And this is something that they very likely adapted from further in South America. Some of you know that the Pan American Highway stops in between Panama and Colombia. There's a terrible, difficult, swampy jungle area that exists between Panama and Colombia, and it's virtually impassable. Many people trying to immigrate from South America to North America have made their way through this terrible jungle area. But you can imagine in prehistoric times that the passage between South America and Costa Rica was even more difficult. And somehow the technique of lost wax casting made its way from South America, where we know it was earlier, into Costa Rica. And look what they've done. There is in Costa Rica a gold museum that shows the skill of this gold metallurgy. And this is prehistoric stuff that is done before the Spaniards ever arrived. It involves also shamanistic symbolism, animal features, combined human-animal figures, and we can see that this was not just jewelry. This was something that had much more significance for the Costa Rican people. Now we come to the second civilization, following the Guayabo civilization. This is the Diquis stone, the Diquis civilization. And they're known for these incredible stone spheres. These are unique in the world. They do not exist anyplace else on the planet. And we don't have the slightest idea what they mean. Again, for religious purposes. But there, the other guesses are we have a standard list of guesses. The other standard list of guesses is that they are signs of prestige. Well, they weigh up to 16 tons, and they've been obviously carefully crafted. For those of you who've been to Rapa Nui, to Easter Island, you see something like this on these great monumental statues on Easter Island, and you wonder, how in the world did people do that? How was it possibly accomplished? And the same thing is true with the Diquis stone spheres. We don't know how they were actually manufactured, why they were manufactured, and what they actually mean. but they are a World Heritage Site, and I don't believe that we're able to actually go and see them, but I wanted you to know that they exist, and if you do come back to Costa Rica, it's certainly something that you should visit. They're astonishing. You see this one stone sphere is as tall as a human being. One other guess is that people had is that they might represent constellations, celestial constellations of stars, but we haven't been able to show that the placement of these stones corresponds to any actual star maps. So that theory is not very potent. But these stone spheres were constructed between 600 and 1500 CE, and 1500 CE is when the Spanish start to arrive. So they are absolutely unique to Costa Rica. Okay, now let's take a look at the various regions of Costa Rica and their indigenous populations. Guanacaste is in the northwest of Costa Rica. It's an area with seasonal dry forests with plains, so that this is the place where the first maize was introduced into Costa Rica and where it was first widely cultivated, and has a river valley agriculture. But it also has the closest ties to Mesoamerica, to Mixtec, Maya, and Aztec cultures. And this is seen in the pottery that we find in Guanacaste, in the northwest part of Costa Rica. And these Mesoamerican ties make that part of Costa Rica the closest to the great empires and to Mexico as well. The Central Highlands is where the Guayabo culture was established. There are volcanic soils. There's tubers and cacao. Tubers, potatoes, and other yucca and other tuberous material that grows well in this kind of volcanic soil, and also cacao. And Costa Rica is one of the places in the Americas where cacao was widely cultivated from a very, very early period of time. And there may have been trade actually with Mexico, between Mexico and Costa Rica for cacao, which had important value both for ritual purposes and also as food. So this Atlantic slope region was a very important part of the culture, and it also, we find from folklore that it was also adapted to earthquakes. Earthquakes had a cultural meaning for people. They consisted of the sorts of rumblings and messages from deities and from the spirit world. The southern Pacific, with the floodplains and the rainforest, that's the area where the Diquis population existed. And agricultural engineering took place. We have irrigation canals that we find in the Diquis, in the southern region, in the Punta Arenas, where we're going to be going, and also this sphere production center. So the final area are the Caribbean lowlands, and that's around the port of Limon on the Caribbean side, which is too far for us to actually visit, but again, a place that you would, I think, find very, very interesting because it is a fully Caribbean today, a fully Caribbean town. Doesn't look like the rest of Costa Rica at all, but it has heavy rainfall. Its the substance of subsistence is geared toward rivers, and it also has an Afro-Caribbean exchange, so that we have Afro-Caribbean populations in Limon mixing with the mestizo population and the Hispanic population in more central Costa Rica. Okay, the social organization is very interesting throughout Costa Rica because we still have the residual social organization of the caiques. Chieftains and still exist in an informal sense. They're not a threat to the government, but people know precisely who their local chief is in their particular indigenous population. And the caiques were not just chiefs. Were not just political leaders. They were also shamans, and they also had important shamanistic power. So they had the knowledge to navigate the spirit world and also to perform healing ceremonies. And like in Colombia, there's a huge pharmacopoeia of traditional healing plants and other healing techniques that are especially important. So the caiques had leaders, they had shamanistic knowledge, and the kinship structure still remains today very strong. People know who their relatives are, and they know about the hereditary nature of chieftainship. The cosmology that we find throughout the indigenous populations in Costa Rica is profoundly animistic. And that means that it relies on a veneration for nature and for natural forces. And there is a direct interchange between human and animal spirits. And we know this largely from the kinds of art that we find throughout the entire region, where we have shamans who are seen as transforming into animal shapes. That's in the iconology. This takes place. Here's a shaman, and here's a shaman as a bird, and we have shaman as jaguars and other animals. And here is a gold figure that is a shamanistic figure, showing a human figure with wings like a bird. So this shamanistic transformation was one of the important areas that we find in the cosmology of the traditional societies. This, by the way, is an exhibition in the Gold Museum in San Jose. Move forward. I'm not getting a response here. Oops. Sorry, this has to do with the computer. It's not. Sure. No. But women, nevertheless, women had important shamanistic and curative functions. So women were, in fact, very important in traditional society in many roles. As I say, they had medicinal qualities. They were curers. Let's just go down to beyond that slide. I think that one, I think, is the right one. Yeah, I know the files are big, I know. think it's not showing me. It's not showing here, though. Okay. We should have gone to the next one. Sorry, folks. We're trying to get our tech. Oh, where are we? Yeah, here we go. Good, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to Emerson. The first contact in Costa Rica was in 1502, and it was Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus, on his fourth voyage, comes to the coast, the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. He encounters natives, and they've got gold, right? And so Columbus writes back to to Ferdinand and Isabella, to his Spanish sponsors, and he says, "Está una Costa Rica." It's a rich coast. And that is how we get the name for Costa Rica. It was actually given to Costa Rica by Columbus, who found that this was a place that had real wealth. Now, of course, they looked for hoards of gold and never found them, but nevertheless, his first impression was that it was rich. He only stayed on the Costa Rican coast for 2 years. I'm sorry, for 2 weeks, not 2 years. He only stayed for 2 weeks and tried very, very hard to get as much to get people to give him as much gold or wealth or whatever as he could possibly get. And here's a little factoid, an interesting one. It seems that he knew that there was going to be an eclipse of the moon during the time that he was there. And so he announced to the natives, somehow made them understand that he could command the skies. And when the eclipse of the moon took place, everybody was quite taken aback because they had animistic belief, and he used this event, this astrological event, astronomical event, in order to be able to get more goods from the native population. Now, the difficulty, of course, was that once it was known that this was a Costa Rica, the Spanish colonization started immediately, and the colonial period was quite devastating for the native population. One of the problems that the Spanish had with conquest was that, again, the nation was highly decentralized. There was no central capital. They couldn't just march into, to a place like, current day Mexico City, where you couldn't just march into the Aztec capital, kill the king and somehow conquer. No, these distributed chiefdoms made conquest really difficult. But nevertheless, they certainly tried. And one of the problems that arose was that they brought, of course, Western diseases for which the populations in these areas had no resistance at all. And so there was tremendous devastation from disease. This is something that also occurred in the South Pacific, in Hawaii and other places where there was no disease resistance. And the Western diseases like measles were really devastating to the population. So the colonial powers, especially the Spanish, were legalized by the Spanish government to essentially, what's the word? I'm trying to avoid saying enslave, but it really is what happened. They were allowed to recruit people for menial labor for their colonial purposes, and the forced labor systems were really resisted by these populations. There was a population collapse because of disease, and people had a choice. They could either stay and submit to colonial rule, or they could retreat to their ecological niches in the country, and that's exactly what happened. Large numbers of the population went back to the mountains or went back to the swampy areas and essentially escaped colonial rule and have been continuous down to the present as a result of their resistance. So here are 8 contemporary peoples that we have today: the Huetar, the Corotega, Brunca, or the Boruca, the Bribri, Guabecar, Guayami, Maleku, and Terraba. And the indigenous groups are the major indigenous groups within Costa Rica. There's tremendous diversity, there's cultural continuity, and as I pointed out on an earlier map, they're largely grouped in the east and in the south, and clustered in these areas closer to Panama. Some groups are in the north and the west, but they are very small. Let's take a look at a couple of them. The Bribri are very likely the descendants of the Guayabo culture. The Bribri are in the Terrialba volcano, the shadow of the Terrialba volcano. They still have matrilineal clans. They have shamanistic medicine and sacred geography. So the volcano becomes a very important feature in their traditional geographical cosmology. And they are quite distinctive in their costumes, in their dwelling forms, and they are a very, very interesting people. The Boruca are likely the descendants of the Diquis people. And they have, among other things that have been noted and celebrated by lots of folks who come to Costa Rica, the Diablitos Festival. And the Diablitos Festival is a festival where the Boruca people make these fantastic masks. Now, if we are able to dock and you're able to go, you may see some of these masks in stores and shops that are either in small token form or in full form. The Diablitos are the ancestral spirits of the area. And the Diablitos Festival is a battle between the ancestral spirits and a bull which represents Spain. It's kind of emblematic. And so in the Diablitos Festival, the Diablitos, the ancestral spirits, always conquer the Spanish incursion. And so this cultural revival happens every year and is one of the big festivals that takes place in Costa Rica. One more time, I'm having this trouble. Here we go. So there are modern adaptations by all of these populations to adapt to ecological challenges. And ecotourism is one of the things that's been active in Costa Rica. And also the organic production of traditional products like, for instance, organic cacao. Organic cacao farming has been in the forefront of agricultural development. There's a lot of linguistic diversity in the traditional populations. The languages that are spoken in Costa Rica belong to a group that's the Chibchan, the Chibchan group, not Mayan, not Aztec, not Inca, but a distinctive linguistic group that is undergoing revival now. Archaeology today becomes one of the more important aspects of life in Costa Rica because of the extraordinarily rich archaeological heritage that we find in the country. The archaeological sites are absolutely everywhere, and they are being excavated and analyzed as fast as it's possible, and also to get ahead of the huaqueros, the people who are essentially grave robbers or archaeological site robbers, in order to try to preserve the cultural heritage of the country. So you're trying to reclaim the narratives of the cultural history and the community collaboration and support for this heritage. And the idea that Costa Rica is not just a kind of a marginal extension of these other great civilizations, but actually has a solid and unique heritage entirely of its own, with a unique language, unique development pattern, unique handicrafts, unique subsistence forms. The stone and gold art is fabulous in Costa Rica, unique and not like you'll find anyplace else in Latin America. Lots of animal symbolism, as would be expected in a society that is interested in centering their religious beliefs on shamanism. And these traditions are still living. UNESCO has recognized the Diquis stone spheres as a cultural heritage site, and the Guayabo Park, National Park, is now under consideration by UNESCO and may be considered a UNESCO heritage site soon. So this global significance is really important. There are ongoing challenges to indigenous communities, but they are very strong. And like the international indigenous movement, which is growing throughout the entire world, they are joining with indigenous groups elsewhere in order to be able to protect their rights and their heritage and to make sure that their culture is preserved. A lot of young people in Costa Rica are especially interested in the preservation of these cultural traditions. So let's take a look at some points that I've been trying to make. The idea of Costa Rica as an ecological crossroads is, I think, an important insight into basic Costa Rican civilization and culture. The idea of flexible chiefdoms that could adapt to different ecological niches and would have the resistance to be able to preserve their communities intact without being subsumed by a larger and more powerful civilizational forces. Integrated traditions, integrating the traditions of Mesoamerica, Mexico, Guatemala, and those areas, and also Latin American traditions, Inca, Muisca traditions from south of Panama, become an important hallmark of the distinctiveness of Costa Rica. So, living cultures today, Costa Rica not being pure Castilian, but rather a rich tapestry of different cultures adapting to different areas of the ecology in the country, and also an understanding that the history of these cultures also forms their destiny, forms their future. So I thank you very much, and I hope that we will have a chance to dock in Costa Rica, and you'll have a chance to see some of these things yourself.